Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. I'm just putting the final matte touches on the scene that I didn't just stamp it out, but I just finished it off with some my color application and detailed finishing in the forms of the usual color box pigment ink and my white gel pen, but in a scene like this that has more of your warmer kind of rustic tones like that, I used the Pilot G2 metallic pen. It's a kind of a set like that, probably sold individually as well. But anyways, this is a scene that was stamped out for one of the stamp sketching videos, stamp sketching videos that I did to test out some of the new designs. This scene right here was to stamp out a new design, but to use it in conjunction with the older designs. This one's based around the Rocky Creek Large stamp, and a lot of the older perimeter designs in the form of things like these reeds down here. The tiny rocks were kind of a previous release of designs right before this current one. And anyways, I wanted to go with a fairly simple color scheme, mainly because I wanted to use this gold gel pen. And to finish it off, I feel like this running water down here kind of cried out for the shimmery type of look, you know, which involved lighting in terms of making the area around this creek lighter. And this little bridge kind of serves its purpose as kind of a gateway to lighting, you know, kind of streaming from below. So I took the area around it and made it darker right down to that bridge. Alcohol-based markers were also used in some of the more detailed areas. The Rocky Creek gives you a lot of opportunity to kind of create form and volume through the use of shadows throughout all those little rocks in there, which is something I like doing. So I used a lot of the alcohol-based markers to get into some of these shadows to make some of these rocks seem a little bit more solid and round, you know, to give them volume and dimension with the use of lights and darks within each one of these. And it's just a real simple process of just taking your gel pen, your alcohol-based ends and reiterating what's already on the image. So if there's some darker shading on some of these rocks, I just took an alcohol-based marker and with the lighter tones, I just added some more tone to those areas in there. Important in this scene to retain some of the lightness of the cardstock, the white cardstock, so that when I go in and add some of these white gel pen and white Colorbox pigment ink marks, that it blends in with the lighting scheme. So, anyways, this is a fun scene to finish off. I really like doing water. You know, it gives a lot of, you know, there's a lot of opportunity for little details in here. Oh, and as far as that, kind of that metallic pen, let me see if I can get this. See that right there? I love metallic pens in scenes, and that where I've added it, it's kind of a medium tone value, but where I've added it in the medium tone values in, you know, over the color box, dye-based inks, you can't really see it too well. In fact, some of it looks kind of dark against that background, but when you start to capture some of the light, of course, the metallics are more reflective than the surrounding marks, so they kind of come out from the background like that when it catches the light. So when it comes to an original like this, you know, you can really have an extra kind of dimension to your card. If you're going to give that to someone, it's like an embossed mark or something of that sort. And that's one of those little tiny details that, for me, kind of creates another, I don't know, detail to hold someone's attention, you know, are those little marks like that. So, really hard to show if I do things like scanning, but on a video like this, you can kind of see the idea of that. So, gold marks in warm tone scenes, sunsets, it looks great. And when it comes to things like the silver pen, I think the silver pen works really good in cooler tone scenes. I love it in your blue color scheme. So, not that you can mix and match. I can add some silver in here if I want to or whatnot. But anyways, I just stuck with the gold in this one. So, anyways, thanks again for tuning into the video, and hope you enjoy the toning process on this one. It was a lot of fun. Okay, setting out here to do a quick card, or at least a quick video, and what better way to do it than to use a composition that I've already stamped out. This was done in one of those stamp sketching videos to test out some of the new designs, and this one's using that little bridge back there. In this case, it's in the background. And as far as the color scheme of this scene, I want it to be done in somewhat of a kind of an antiqued, warm tone color scheme. And the reason why I'm doing that is I picked up a couple of packs of paper recently at this place called Kelly Paper. It's a chain of stores. I believe it's just in the West here, but I picked up this great, kind of real plain looking paper called Lunch Bag. It looks like a, I don't know, paper grocery store type of bag, or like a traditional lunch bag. And this one is a cover stock, and when I got back and just looked through my stock of paper that I had, I realized I already had Lunch Bag, but this one's a text, so it's real thin, but this one's the cover stock, so it's nice and thick. I like doing some different matting with these types of papers, and I found this beautiful pack of Star Dream paper. It's got that iridescence to it. I have this is sealed in plastic right now, but it's kind of that shimmery looking paper, and it's I really like that color of brown, but then it has this bronze type of shimmer to it, which I really seem to like because I end up buying a lot of that Star Dream series of papers. So this I want this to be matched with that. And also in the previous couple videos I mentioned these types of pens right here, these metallic roller ball pens. This one I haven't even used before, but I'll use it on this scene. And we'll try some gold accents in kind of a warm tone. Not really golden, but more sepia looking scene. Okay, so colors of inks, different shades of brown. The distress inks would be really good for this, more the brownish hue. Colors, maybe not so much the mustard seed, peeled paint, or lavender, but a lot of us have these types of colors in our repertoire. And throwing in a memento, I had that color sitting around, so let's give this a try. Okay, starting off with the lightest tones. A lot of the distress inks are fairly light in value. Doesn't matter which one you use. Distress inks too are made by Ranger, and they have kind of a thicker binder, whatever that solution is that they use for inks. So I'm going to start off with that. Looking at this, I'm thinking about, just in general, about having the darker edges to kind of create a vignette, and I'll want this passageway of water to remain nice and light. If I darken it, it looks kind of strange unless, you know, you're doing some sort of snowy scene where the water can be darker and you have the area around it. But otherwise I want to create somewhat of a contrast between that flowing water and the surrounding rocks, okay? And so we'll just start off with our colors on the outside and work our way in. That way when we get to that inner area, we've already applied a lot of that ink to the paper and off of the tip. So when I'm in that center area, I've already wiped off most of it on the edge, so I'm working from the outside in. Okay, outside in. Alright? I'm not working like this, perimeter oriented like this, okay? I'm working small areas like this so that I can benefit from the wet to dry tip, okay? And that way I can have a nice transition, a nice smooth transition of dark to light. Sometimes doing these stamp sketches is kind of a nice way to work as far as a method goes. I don't know if we're using a different part of our brain or something like that, but sometimes if you just start working on a lot of compositions, you get really in tune with those images, and putting together a lot of compositions like this and just thinking about finishing them off later can be a nice way to go. It's not so much assembly line because you don't have to do the same card 20 times, but you can do several different compositions, and I don't know, just that composing aspect of things gets really fluid. So in the video where I did some of these stamp sketches, I probably did about 5 or 6. It's a little bit different because I used a lot of these stamps for the first time, so I didn't really know, wasn't really in a groove of how to use them, but just in terms of laying everything down and doing it quickly, sometimes when you do it quickly, things can look a little bit more fluid and maybe more spontaneous. Sometimes there's there's less of a rigidity to the compositional part of a scene. Okay, now that was antique linen, sorry. And this is a pale orange. Basically, the bottom line is this: it's not too much darker. The color that I go with, after one color isn't too much darker in value than the previous one. I'm using the same tip, so I will get some sort of fusion color between the previous one and the next one, which will make the blending of the two on the page card nice and easy. Now I'm starting to look at different things. We don't have a lot of things like shading in here going right now, but a little bit. I'm starting to look at... These rocks are a big jumble, and there's a lot of light and shade within kind of small areas, so when I move into my darker tones, I'll probably be a little bit more careful about where I place this color, but for the most part, it's being added to the outside edge of the card, and with less of it in the middle, okay? I'm not thinking about things like, okay, let me get that one little shadow in the rock right there and leave the other area light, and then the rock behind it, make it dark. I'm not thinking so detailed quite yet. Okay, but you can see kind of the overall lighting scheme, which would be the value scheme in the scene, okay? I'm thinking about having it lighter in there, like maybe it's a sunset or something like that, or a sunrise, and kind of that lighter area in the background underneath the bridge, and then we'll have the light kind of coming through the bottom of that bridge. So it'll be darker up top here, lighter in the there, with that light kind of creeping through here. That's the concept, at least right now. Let's see where it gets to. Okay, after that color, we can go with a medium tone brown, but I'm thinking this tea dye could be potentially lighter than that medium brown. We'll see. I think it is. That brown being applied right now is fairly light in value as well. But I have those two other colors, so what is the true value of this on its own? It's probably darker than what it looks like right now. Okay. I'm also starting to get the feeling of this card getting very slippery, so the ink isn't being applied to the card very quickly, which is fine because you want things to blend on the surface of this card in a nice, easy fashion. This is a glossy cardstock, so it kind of streaks and applies on the surface as opposed to getting absorbed into the paper very quickly, which is what I want right now. Okay, kind of coming around, we'll go with more streaks in here now. Well, I can water it for it to be a little bit streaky, so it looks, what I'm doing is I'm doing something like this, okay? Right? So it's going dark, light, dark type of thing, and I'll come in the same way from the other side. So that's what's going on down in this area, okay? Streak it in. I have this at a bit of an angle, okay? So I'm not using the whole thing. I'm using more of it like this on its edge, okay? And just make multiple passes like that at an angle. Coming back, same thing. Alright, now I do want some of these rocks in here to get a little bit of color, so maybe I can use the little tip of this applicator. By the way, this is the Color Box Stylus tool. And I can get pretty detailed with that little tip right there. Some alcohol-based markers will come in handy. Okay, this is dark enough now of a hue. Well, it's still not very dark. It's dark enough where I can start getting into some of these shadows. So we'll put a little bit on the base of the image, which is the rock, and leave the top a little bit lighter, and the background rock above it. I'm going to show this closer up here. I'll make it a little bit darker. So let's see what this kind of oscillation of light and shadow might look like right now. I hope this will show up on the video, but let's see. Okay, see this right here? I've added a little bit of shade back here, left the top of the rock light, shade back there, left the top of the rock light. Same thing going on in here, darker, lighter, and darker back in here. And you do that by just, you can take your tip and just kind of get in there like so, okay? And it just blends right in because the color that I'm applying at any given time isn't so much darker than the previous color. So you don't have this big, huge, you know, swatch of color that looks kind of obtrusive, you know. It just, you can kind of spread it around like that, okay? What I mean by that is I'm not getting like a big shape like that. showing up somewhere in here. It blends right in. That's why it's always kind of important to stay with those lighter colors too, and apply a good amount of them so that the darker colors to come, whatever colors they are, and whatever brands of ink, some are more absorbent than others, they'll blend and spread right in, okay? As long as they're dye-based inks. And as long as there isn't some kind of brand out there now that's like some kind of fast drying, you know, by design ink. So there were so many different types of inks coming out at one time. I had to kind of be careful about what I said. There was certain types of pigment inks, then kind of a faster drying pigment ink came out. So in some of my early lessons, or I probably haven't changed it, I just say, you know, use your pigment ink this way, you know. But then other types of inks came out, so that kind of method might not apply anymore. Okay, perimeter again, adding that nice vignette. I'm still kind of in a lighter value right now, so a little ways to go. All right, that looks good with that tea dye. Let's try this walnut stain. Let's see what color that is. It's a little bit darker, okay, than the previous one. But let's see what it looks like on here. Okay, looks pretty good as far as the next hue goes. It's starting to look a little bit more antiqued, I would say. Rustic, whatever description you want to use for it. Create a nice shimmer. Now, I'm being careful not to... When you start getting into these darker tones like this is where usually, if people lose kind of that lighting scheme going from light to dark, they just get all dark. It's because they take the darker colors in too far, and then they cover up all that lighter tone with too heavy a concentration of the darker tones. I can come in here, but just make sure that I'm coming in with kind of that version, you know, a dry version of it, as opposed to a wet version of it, okay? So that's why you always kind of start off on the outside, take off some of that ink. And it also depends if your pads are getting very dry, well, then you might not need to always start on the outside, so you have to get a feel for it. Just, you know, you can always dab it around a little bit and see how much ink you're applying. Maybe if you're using a really dry pad, by the time you get to the darkest color, it doesn't even matter. You ink it up and you're going here, and you know, you can be adding some color around forever and it just doesn't get that dark just because it's, you know, you're using a dry pad, which isn't a bad thing. You know, the drier it is, the more control you have over it. Of course, the longer it takes to kind of color things up, but if you want control, then use a drier applicator. Alright, I want a little bit of that tone, and maybe I should have come in here underneath that bridge with a little bit of a color before. I'm kind of using a slightly darker one, but that's okay because it was dry. I'm talking about this area underneath that bridge where it's kind of peeking out from underneath there, some of the light. really hitting those shadows in the same fashion as before, just kind of holding this at a bit of an angle, getting some color on them, increasing the value range of that object, having some areas of it dark, leaving some areas of it light. Okay, let's go on the perimeter. Starting to look a little bit more shimmery, perhaps. We don't always, I don't take my scenes always. I mean, some of them I want dark, but I don't always take scenes dark just to make them dark. I want to take certain areas darker to make my lighter areas seem lighter by contrast. Because we're not working with formal, like, light, you know, we don't have these cards backlit with, you know, a light bulb or something like that. So what we're getting is we're always getting reflected light. So the lighter you want these areas to seem, to appear, the darker you have to take certain areas of the scene or areas around that area, you know, to create, you know, because it's about contrast more than light. So here I want that area to really sparkle and stand out, so I'm taking my areas that I can, the areas usually the farthest from it, which would be the perimeter, and making them darker. Okay, I think it adds a little bit of drama to it. Now, that's just for certain scenes. Some of the scenes you don't want that drama, you want them to look more serene, say for example. Then you want to add that contrast in there, of course. What you don't want, just simply don't add. Okay, this is a brown Marvy. It's the number 6 Marvy, as far as their numbering system goes. It's always been one of my favorite colors to work with. This brown can be... It's saved a lot of scenes of mine, okay? Especially warm tone scenes. Some colors can be very bright. Some entire lines of inks can be very bright, like a patch of grass or something of that sort, where you're working with greens and light greens. Well, sometimes you don't want it to look like, I don't know, like a Christmas green in your grass. You know, a kind of a neutral, bright green. So this brown, if you add that brown over it, it can just kind of mellow things out a little bit more than how it looks without it. And that's what I've always liked about this color. It can just do the right thing in terms of mellowing out a super bright composition. Sunset colors, of course, reds, yellows. Alright, and it's such a warm, glowing brown. I really like it. So when I say mellowing out, it just... the intensity is there, but just the hot color that you can achieve with certain color schemes can be just... It does what it needs to do. Maybe it makes things look more natural or something. I'm not quite sure. Okay, let's see what this is getting to. Now it's starting to come together, isn't it? Not just because of that one brown, but because of the value of it. You can really see the color scheme. It's starting to look more, I don't know, shimmery in the water, I would say. So let's try... I don't think I've used this rich cocoa in a while. Let's give it a shot. I don't even know what value it is. Well, it's pretty true to this sticker on top, I would say. Always kind of add it in a little corner. You want to see what value it looks like over the top of. Okay, now mementos are really thick, slippery inks. Okay, so it's you can see what I can do. I can go like that if I want to. A really horrific look, but it really just spreads out perfectly. If not too much at this point in time. A lot of times with my thicker inks, I mean my darker inks, I don't go with such a thick one, but yeah, okay, it's applying pretty good. Sometimes even when I dab it, use a dabbing motion, it doesn't seem to be applying very quickly, but I would say it's applying at a rate just right. Okay. In other words, it's, you know, it's building up on the page just fine. It's not coming off with each tap, you know, like add on, take off, add on, take off, which sometimes happens with some layers of ink that you might be adding if you're adding in so many layers that, like I do. Okay, coming along. There is a vignette already being created. And this is going to be strengthening that kind of vignette look. By the time you get to these darker tones, okay, I like this cocoa color. I would say quite a bit here. It's a little bit of a different, it's a different brown than the dark brown from Marvy, which I often use, or have used often. But if you have both, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can use them in conjunction with one another and see if, you know, the combination isn't greater than the sum of its parts. Okay, let's see here. Coming along. Let's add some more in the shadows. What you'd often hear in drawing classes, or when I was studying art, was we'd always be talking about painting or drawing or something like that. You add a little bit of a contrast next to something, and they'll always say, you always heard the word pop. You know, so you add some darker here or whatever, we added something here and that made that area pop, you know, it makes it stand out. So, you know, once again, contrasts. I mean, you might do a temperature change and it might make it pop, but 9 times out of 10 is about contrast. Just making something stand out a little bit more. Okay, this is the number 18 Marvy brown, dark brown, and it looks a little bit darker than the rich cocoa memento, so wow, this card is really, really wet on that perimeter area. I touched it and I was kind of dragging some ink off of it at this point in time. So I'm officially working on quite a wet card on the perimeter, not in the middle, but where I've added the most amount of ink so far. I'll put a little of this brown into the bridge. I plan on hitting that bridge with a little bit of alcohol ink just to get into some of the details that I can't get into with a big thick pad like this. I used to go to a lot more shows. Well, I used to go to shows, I should say, conventions, and do demonstrations like this, and most of the times I would be giving the cards away. I'd take requests, what do you want to see, and sometimes people would, in addition to the card, they'd ask me for this. Some sort of abstract, maybe. But I say that because you can see how much ink ends up on your paper here. I don't think that is wasted ink, okay? But that's because we're always starting on the outside edges, you know, and then working your way in. So I'm kind of that being said, I'm usually starting kind of halfway on and halfway off, you know, like this, tapping, moving, inking, tapping, moving. Because again, I don't want to have kind of this isolated thing sitting right in the middle of my scene somewhere, even if it is on the outside edge. Okay, this is black. Now, black, I find if you stamp out your images in black, it's a good idea to have some of that same value or color, whatever. If you stamp out all your things in dark brown, then that's probably as far as I would go as far as the coloring process goes. But whatever the darkest thing in the scene is, if you're doing this type of coloring process, ending up with that same color in the toning process kind of brings things together. Now that's what's happening here, in my opinion. Things tend to blend in with their surrounding areas better. See here, I've gone up to here right now with that black. I don't have any up here. You can see the difference between, let's do a little bit of a close-up here. Okay, that side right there, you see how it really blends into the side. And over here right now, you know, you can see all of that imagery, which is fine. I don't want it to eradicate it. I just want it to blend in a little bit more. So this is before. Okay, and that is an after. See how those trees and everything just kind of come in from that that surrounding area in a nice smooth fashion. Okay, tipping the edges. I start out on the card about 1/4 of an inch or so. Again, I don't want to have big oval shapes right in the middle of the scene at this point in time. Okay. Especially this color, if I was going with a Memento that's a thicker ink than Marvy, then maybe I can go like that and then just blend it out. But with the Marvy, I have to be a little more careful, so start on a little corner like this, okay, and just proceed to blending that in. See, I'm always starting kind of off and working on in, okay. All right. If you notice, I'm always kind of spinning my card. It's because it's easier to just keep your hand, in, as far as repetitive motion, I'm always going like this, okay? This is my nice ergonomic position to hold it. It's in a specific, you know, distance from my body, okay? If I'm doing this, then I'm having to go over here and tapping like this, you know, always having the card straight up. It's just easier to tap like this, okay? Than to do all that work, so this is just nice and comfortable. There's a lot of control over it, so use your opposing hand. If you're left-handed, same thing, you know, tapping like this and flipping the card around. And I think that comes into play as far as the application of ink goes. I think things look smoother if it was more comfortable to apply in a smooth, easy fashion for your hands and arms. Okay. Going in here, doing some of that little detailing with a very dry black on my tip here. Okay. Alright, so quarter page scene I've used, which you do not have to do. Was that 7 colors, 8 colors? I don't know if that was that many. We don't have to do that. If you have a range of 3 or whatever, light, medium, dark, then just do that. If you have them, you might as well kind of intersperse them or mix them in and give it a try. Okay, now before I move into some tighter detailing, let's take a look at some different pens here. I don't think I'm going to use the darker versions, but here's some colors right now. Okay, these are some alcohol inks. Use whatever brand you have. These are La Plume permanent alcohol inks, okay? I don't know what color this is. This is beige. Okay, I was going to say that looks almost greenish, but apricot, sepia. You know what I'm getting at here. It's kind of going with the same color scheme as the ones we have in the scene already. I doubt if beige will even show up here, but it's very light. You can see when I'm starting off with a new kind of media, okay, I'm starting light again. I want to work up in my darker tones. I can get in some of this water area where it was looking very minimal. The alcohol-based markers should not mix and smear any water-based markers because of the different binder, okay? They can even come into these areas. I couldn't get this rock really well. This rock really stands out right now because it's not rendered with any tone. I'm talking about this one right here. So why not come in with the alcohol-based markers and give it some weight and give it a sense of being solid or opaque by having some color on it. Alright. The apricot. That one's really light as well. It's almost as light as the beige. Let me go ahead and add some more tone to some of these. Okay. Sepia. Start off in the shadows. Okay. You see that here in the shadow? Let me see if I can do this, holding this. Okay. A little bit more dimensional. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of reiterating the shading that's already on the design. I've already added a lot of tone in the form of little black dots in that stippling process. Okay, so I'm just going in there and just reiterating that. But I already had some color down, so I'm not going in with a light on bare paper. Okay, so just go in and reiterate what's already on the design. Okay, all these little rocks down in here too. We can give them a little bit of... Alright, my hand's getting tired from holding that up. Kind of a little bit of a shadow to them. Okay, here we go. Come on, there we go. See, I've kind of just gone and add a little bit of a streak around it. I think I want to smooth it out a little bit more, but it adds a little bit of dimension down here. Okay. I've added a lot of this sepia. Let's go in and let me see this. This is sunlight yellow. No, too bright. Let me go back into that apricot, okay? And I want to just spread some of that sepia out a little bit, where I've added a few little dabs of it. I want that to spread out a little bit. Now, since you're using an alcohol-based pen, on alcohol, it will kind of make some of that alcohol ink go back into solution. So this is kind of being used as a blender tool. I'm just using a blending color, which any color can be used for. Instead of using a blending tool, I'm applying a little bit more color while I'm at it. Okay. I love that sepia, but it needed to be kind of incorporated in a little bit more. Alright. So often I work, that being said, I work from light to dark and sometimes back to light again. See, is this squeaking here making anyone nuts? It doesn't really bother me, but I'm not the one kind of sitting there watching it. Sometimes when someone else is doing it, it drives you nuts. Okay. Where'd that sepia go? Okay. Alright, let's add some details into this bridge. Alright, I gotta lower this tripod. Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. Instead of holding that up in the air, let me see if I can do this here. Okay, now there's some little details on this bridge, like this rail might have some dimension to it. And I can just kind of go in certain areas and add a little bit of additional tone. Now this is something that would really be, you know, impossible with a big sponging method, you know, using that dye-based ink. You can use, if you have things like La Plumes or dual head dye-based pens, you can use that as well. But see, it's kind of an oscillation now of light and dark, but that's with the sepia. Let's go back into that apricot, or just any other lighter tone, and spread that around a little bit, kind of blend it out. So it doesn't look like a mark of a pen. That's not what I'm going after here. Okay. Looks a little bit better. There's some variation here. Okay, see that right there? Can't do that with you know, kind of a sponging method. Maybe even something else. Maybe oh, I don't want to go too dark, but let me test this. Oh, that was a maroon. And then I went back in with the apricot and kind of spread that around a little bit. All right. Going back in and adding just some little textural marks with this apricot. It probably doesn't show up at all, but that's fine. It could be just very, very subtle. Alright, well I have this tripod, and the camera's like 12 inches from the paper. Let's go in and add some fun effects with our, you can probably even read this, it's so close up. This is the Uniball Signo pen. You can see that ink on my finger right here from the perimeter. And let's go in and kind of add that little bit of a shimmer to your water, starting it in the lighter areas. Okay. If I want a larger dot, I just kind of draw it, or oval. I'm kind of doing it in the same shape as some of those rocks down there, so it kind of blends in, or not really blends in, but it harmonizes with the shapes that are already in the water. Okay, so we have these little tiny rocks from the Tiny Rock stamp, so I might add a shape that's similar to it like that. Okay. And I feel that this little touch here gives the water a surface and more dimension. Okay. Don't have too many of these dots out in the darker areas. As I mentioned before, it stands out too much, and in the shadows, typically, if it's dark, you don't have this kind of light going into those areas anyways, right? Because it's in the shadows, so coming along. This whole composition is based around the Rocky Creek. Okay, let's take a look at it. Coming along. Okay, let's hit some of this with some pigment ink. We'll use the color box Frost White pigment ink. If you're not a stamper, pigment ink is almost like it's like a paint. There's a certain opacity to it. When used like I'm using it though, it's more of a translucency, okay? I want the images to show through it slightly, but for it to have a slight opacity to it, or translucency, I should say. So it looks like fog. Okay. And in a scene like this, it would represent just some little moisture coming off of the water, and it's being illuminated by the light shining on it. Okay. Maybe if it's in the distance, like this. Maybe I'll put some of it on this bridge, where it's kind of like the light is coming through it. So you might have some of the edges of the bridge a little bit more, I wouldn't say obscured, but softened. Okay, so it looks like that light is kind of coming through here now. I'll take some of it off. A lot of times when I'm applying this ink like this, it's a lot of times I take as much off as I put on sometimes, because I just it stands out too much. This is like a dry brushing application of this ink, I should say, too. So it's not going on in big globs. Okay, I've taken a lot of it off the tip before I even apply it to the card, to the scene. Okay, so we have it kind of coming through. You can really tell where it is, though, obviously, right? You know, because there's an oscillation of having some and not, you know, any. And if you apply too much, like I got a little blob of it, or a fingerprint of it on the outside edge, you can just rub it off, or you can wait till it dries and then rub it off too. And this is where leaving some of the white of the page, the card, comes into play. If you have this light shining, reflecting off some of your objects, you want to have the light of the paper, your white cardstock, to remain. In other words, if everything got toned out beige, that means you have kind of this beige light shining on things, so you wouldn't have a white light being reflected in the mist. It stands out too much. It looks kind of awkward, so you have to have something to kind of relate to that. So there's little areas of, I don't know, I put a little bit of tone down there, but not so much where this white pigment ink is kind of obtrusive and kind of unrelated. Okay. So see this light kind of shining through that bridge on the underside of it. Okay, let me see where, okay, right there. See just that little bit here, here, and here. This is what it looks like on the overall. Okay, when you look at it from a distance. Alright, where did my gold pen went? It's right here on my desk. This is brand new. I just took off that little plastic covering. Perfect. Metallic pens, I don't know, I haven't had as much problem with metallic pens in the past years as I have with certain brands of the white gel pen. But it's nice to open it up and see it working beautifully. Okay, where do you add some of this? I would add it in kind of similar areas. Maybe with this gold, I might hit some of the medium to darker areas. Well, not darker, but medium areas, because this gold paint is kind of a medium darker hue, but the thing about it is, this is what's bad about this video, is that when I hold it up, it doesn't, I don't know if you can see it kind of reflected. I was looking at that last video that I did, and I was thinking, I don't know if you can really tell. Maybe you can tell right there a little bit. See where that shimmer starts to show a little bit right in here? It reflects that light and that golden tone, so it makes for a nice little touch. I was going to say to anyone that's holding the card, it's that little detail that might not be apparent when you look at the overall, but if it catches that light in a certain way, then you have that extra little treat of having this shimmery element, or this reflective element, in the scene, in the card. It would be like if you got a printed card and had, you know, that embossed, gold embossed or something like that. That's kind of what this little gold mark looks like that you're drawing in here. Okay, yeah, there it is. See that? Invisible, right? And you go like that and see where it's catching that light. Yeah, especially right through here. See, you can't see anything, and then there it is. So it's that fun little element. Those are the types of elements that I really enjoy doing. Things you can't necessarily see, but it's all in the details. Okay, let's take a look at this scene. We have a pretty dark vignette effect on this, but by contrast, the more you want this to stand out in terms of lighting and the viewer's attention, the darker you take the perimeter area, which isn't to say that you have to take the perimeter area as dark as something like this, okay? Personally, I really wanted that to really pop, going back to that word. So I took the areas around it and I give it a heavy saturation of tones, going all the way to black, which is the same color that I stamped out the black in. When it came down to the smallest of details, things like the paint pen, we really wanted that light to shimmer. So by contrast, those little dots against that surrounding area like that really stand out. Somewhat of an antiqued look. I don't know if it really looks like a sepia print. Not really, but it kind of references that type of thing. And it's a fun color scheme. It's a simple color scheme. Just working with your light tones, medium browns, darker browns. The distress inks, I think, by nature are supposed to have that kind of antique look, right? So those are a really great line of inks to use in something like this. Just working with your lighter ones and then progressively working into the darker ones. If you can't tell what color is darker than another, it really won't matter which one goes first, okay? So anyways, that's it. It was fun finishing off one of my stamp sketches. When I was doing those stamp sketches, I really wanted to get into them, and I couldn't wait to see, I was thinking to myself, it would be nice to be able to tell what it's going to look like in the end. But it was that video was all about composition, so I kind of had to refrain from finishing it off in that video because that's not what the video was about. So anyway, fun scene to do, fun scene to finish off, and we have that nice little stony bridge in the background for a nice, I don't know, I see it more as sunset than sunrise because most of the times I'm not awake to see the sunrise, so nice shimmery light to kind of go along with that time of day. Okay, anyways, thanks for watching the video and hope you enjoyed it.